Before we get started, a heads up. This episode contains strong language, descriptions of violence, and a gay slur. It also mentions suicide. It may not be appropriate for some listeners. In the late 1960s, Tom Amiano had a job he loved. He worked as a special education teacher at a public elementary school in San Francisco.
My teaching experience was for kids who were marginalized and ridiculed and mislabeled.
Every day, Tom brought a nurturing spirit and a big personality to the classroom.
I was kind of cute. I was very effeminate. People said I was very funny. I had a secret desire to be a stand-up comic. And the joke I made was this. They say, you can't be gay and be a teacher, but show me a room full of teachers and I'll show you a gay bar. So there you are.
For Tom, it wasn't just a joke. That line captured the central conflict of his life.
There was the daytime teaching and the nighttime disco bunny. The main thing was, I decided it was best for me to really embrace my identity as a gay man.
In the 1960s, gay sex was illegal in California and almost everywhere else in the country. That meant Tom and millions of other Americans were presumed criminals.
The police were terrible. There was a lot of entrapment going on.
Police officers would go undercover at gay bars, entice their targets, then arrest them. It was a risk for all gay people, but Tom's job made him particularly vulnerable. In California, teachers found guilty of sodomy, having oral or anal sex, were at risk of losing their certifications. If Tom got outed, his career as an educator could be over.
The bars were the only places you could socialize. As a teacher, I would kind of stealthily go to the cash room, what was considered at that time a gay neighborhood. My heart would be beating very, very strongly.
Despite the risk of being arrested or fired, Tom felt freer and more fulfilled than he ever had before.
I mean, to be frank, it was great to meet guys and hook up, but the real epiphany is that you met people and then they became your chosen family. That dynamic really did change me and made me feel very affirmed about who I was as a gay man.
By the mid-1970s, Tom had been a teacher in San Francisco for 7 years, and the school district's policy was basically don't ask, don't tell.
And I said, this just isn't working for me. We need to do something.
Tom decided to come out to colleagues he trusted. And he found a couple of other teachers in San Francisco who'd done the same.
There was only like 2 or 3 of us who were out. The other closeted ones were deeply offended by us and very much afraid. I mean, I wanted to slap them, but, in fairness, they could have lost their jobs. They weren't out to their family. Some of them were married. And then there's always, don't rock the boat.
Tom wanted to rock the boat. With a handful of out colleagues, he formed a group called the Gay Teachers Coalition. And in 1975, they found their first fight. The issue was a new school district hiring policy. It banned discrimination based on race, religion, sex, and disability. But refusing to hire someone because of their sexual orientation, that was fair game. Teachers like Tom wouldn't be protected at all.
And we decided to organize around that.
In June 1975, the Gay Teachers Coalition held its first ever press conference. They called for the district to ban discrimination against lesbians and gays.
Made the front page of the San Francisco Examiner, and it said, gay, gifted, and closeted. Not a bad headline.
And right there above the fold was Tom's photo.
I had a really bad perm and a beard. Yeah, I looked like Abby Hoffman on acid.
The article said he was an outstanding teacher. It also said he was terrified that someone might accuse him of child abuse because of the malicious lie that gay men, especially ones who work with kids, are molesters. Tom knew it was important to get his story out there, but one article wouldn't convince the school board to change its policy. He needed to do more.
We had this protest, which was big in San Francisco. There was always a protest.
Tom and his colleagues rounded up more than 200 people and marched outside a school board meeting. Were you nervous at all?
Oh, yeah. I had dry mouth. And, I was young, and you're surrounded by people who are supporting you, but also by cops. but there was no going back.
The gay teachers and their allies stormed into the building, singing As the Gays Come Marching In. And then, with Tom and his group holding their breath, the board members took a new vote on the non-discrimination policy. This time, Tom's side won. Gay teachers would be protected.
We were totally shocked, and that vote really changed everything. We went out and celebrated. Lots of tears. I don't think I got home till 4 a.m.
For Tom Amiano, it felt like a huge step forward. Like finally he could start living without fear. But that sense of freedom wouldn't last. Because 2 years later, a state legislator named John Briggs would make an extraordinary proposal.
We are going to restore morality to the classroom and remove openly and blatant homosexuals from influencing and teaching our young.
This is Slow Burn, Season 9, Gays Against Briggs. I'm your host, Christina Cauterucci. Over the next 7 episodes, I'm going to tell you about one of the most consequential civil rights battles in American history.
On its surface, a very simple proposition. Do you or don't you want homosexuals teaching your children?
In the late 1970s, a moral panic was sweeping across the United States, endangering the jobs, safety, and fundamental rights of gay people. It all built up to a massive showdown over the Briggs Initiative, a referendum to ban gay teachers from California public schools. For the first time ever, gay rights and gay futures were put to a statewide popular vote. And gay Californians like Tom Amiano suddenly found themselves at the center of the biggest fight for gay rights the country had ever seen. To have a shot at beating John Briggs, they would have to change the minds of millions of Californians and take monumental risks, all in the hope of securing a better life for themselves and everyone who'd come after.
People think hope is this ephemeral, Hallmark card sentiment, but hope is getting your ass kicked and getting back up, bloodied and all. Like the drag queens say, take out the earrings, sharpen the nails. Round 2, baby.
This is Episode 1, a hotbed of homosexuality. There's now a game-changing product to use before a night out with drinks. It's called Z-Biotics. Let's face it, after a night with drinks, it's tough to bounce back the next day. You have to make a choice. You can either have a great night or a great next day. Z-Biotics is a surefire way to wake up feeling fresh after a night of drinking. Z-Biotics pre-alcohol probiotic drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Z-Biotics produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make Z-Biotics your first drink of the night, drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best tomorrow. Go to zbiotics.com/slowburn to get 15% off your first order when you use Slowburn at checkout. Z-Biotics is backed with a 100% money-back guarantee, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/slowburn and use the code SLOWBURN at checkout for 15% off.
So can I just sit back like this? I don't need to lean forward.
I think you're good, yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
This is Cleve Jones, Clevejones. We're in San Francisco. We're in Beck's Motor Lodge, which used to be a sex club and den of iniquity and a place where you could buy any illicit drug you wanted.
And we're bringing that spirit back today.
I hope not. I'm too old.
Beck's Motor Lodge in the Castro is one of those refurbished old motels that leans hard into mid-century modern kitsch. I stayed there when I visited San Francisco earlier this year and invited Cleve Jones to come over for an interview. I knew nothing about its history when I asked him to meet me there.
I have witnessed some bizarro shit here. Some people could just wander in and out, and people that were really in the mood would just come, get a room that was dirt cheap and just kind of leave their door open.
Growing up, Cleve couldn't imagine anything like what he'd see at Beck's Motor Lodge. All he knew was that he was somehow different.
I think so. I was probably maybe 12 or 13 when I kind of put the words to it, because my father was a clinical psychologist. So the house was filled with books. And I looked it up. And I thought, uh-oh, I'm in trouble now.
Cleve's parents were Quakers, and the whole family was involved in the civil rights movement. But no matter how progressive their politics were, they weren't going to accept a gay kid.
I was pretty certain, and it was later confirmed by conversations, that they would have had me committed. And I was terrified. I was planning to kill myself. I did not see any possibility of any hope.
It wasn't until his junior year of high school in Phoenix, Arizona, that Cleve found something to reach for. He discovered it in his school library while he was skipping gym class to avoid the bullies.
I got the 1971 Year in Review issue of Life magazine, and they had a big story, like 10 pages, about this new movement called gay liberation. And I remember just trembling as I read it, because it sounds kind of inconceivable now, but that was the moment when I found out I wasn't the only one. I mean, I had read that there were these people, but in my mind, they were all criminals and frightening, horrifying people. And to find out that there was this community that existed, it was just an extraordinary revelation. And then I thought, well, if I can just get through high school, I'm going to get the hell out of Phoenix.
As soon as Cleve graduated, he started hitchhiking. He had $20 in his pocket, and he knew exactly where he needed to go. In the 1960s, San Francisco had been the heartbeat of hippie culture, the home of the Summer of Love, a hotbed of protest and radical politics. In the 1970s, it was also the capital of gay America.
A city has emerged where homosexuality is not only tolerated, but thrives.
To me, it seemed like Oz, that this would be the Emerald City. You know, the Greyhound buses would pull in, and another 20, 30 kids would come off the bus from Iowa every day.
Between 1972 and 1977, about 100,000 gay people moved to San Francisco, roughly 1/7 of the city's population. Back then, people used the terms lesbian and gay, or just gay, to describe their community. So that's what I'll be using too.
The gays of San Francisco live all over the city, but this is the heart of their community, Castro Street. It's become the homosexual mecca of the Western world.
Okay, we are on Castro Street. We are walking up from 18th Street up to Market and 17th Street, where they come together.
Ruth Mahaney came to San Francisco from Indiana in 1971. She lived with a bunch of other lesbians, just blocks from where I met her earlier this year in the Castro district. Ruth and her roommates were all involved in a million political causes and reveling in a kind of social life they couldn't find anywhere else.
I remember a friend of mine came up to visit from San Diego, and we were holding hands, and she was totally amazed that we could hold hands on the street. It was like, that was mind-blowing to her, and she still remembers it. I've heard her talk about it, that moment that she realized we could do that.
Gays weren't the only ones drawn to the Castro. Tourists would ride through on buses, checking out the strange neighborhood they'd heard about on the news. A place where men touched the butts of other men and the women kissed in bars.
It seems like they're having a real good time down there. And there are times when I wish that I was gay, just so I could take part in that.
We became part of the selling points of, come to San Francisco and see queer people. Just their noses pressed up against the windows and sort of shock and big eyes. My roommate and I used to grab each other and sort of hump each other to, make out, look like we were making out. We were not in a relationship and never were, but We would sort of put on a show since they had paid good money to come and see weird things. So here we are, you know.
So many of the gays who moved to the Castro had grown up believing the sex they wanted was shameful, the love they wanted was wrong, and the lives they wanted were impossible. To them, San Francisco felt like a miracle.
There were bars where butch lesbians would play pool and get in fights on the sidewalk, and cowboy bars where they played country western music and the boys would line dance. I just thought, this is so beautiful.
There was also a spot called Twin Peaks, supposedly the first gay bar in the country to have plate glass windows, revealing the patrons to the outside world. It's still open today. And Cleve and I, by total coincidence, had both gone there the night before our interview.
And I used to make fun of that bar because it was full of older men, and we would call it the glass coffin or the wrinkle room.
I tried not to be offended. When Cleve moved to San Francisco, he had no money, no job, and no place to live. But he made it work. He found roommates and got a gig as a telemarketer. And at night, he kept busy.
It was basically a candy store for people who had been told they couldn't eat sweets their whole lives.
This is not an ordinary bookstore. It's one of San Francisco's 8 glory holes, a place where gay men come for anonymous sex.
And there was a casual acceptance that everybody was going to be having as much sex as they wanted. But it seems so odd to use this word, but there was an innocence to it. And we were all just kind of falling in love with each other. You could walk down the street and see somebody and make eye contact and walk a few more feet and then glance back over your shoulder, and the next thing you know, you're in bed, and then you embark on a romantic adventure.
When I sat down to chat with Ruth, she told me that despite all the newfound freedom, the Castro wasn't a gay utopia. In the mid-1970s, there were tensions within the gay scene between groups that didn't necessarily see themselves as part of a single community.
Gay men were really in this phase of sort of having the Castro for the first time, having a space, a public space that they could be in and be out and be safe. And women being there was not part of their plan. We would walk down the street, and I remember they didn't step aside. We had to move, not them.
But mostly, it was straight people who brought hostility to the Castro. A lot of longtime residents weren't thrilled to suddenly find themselves in a flourishing gayborhood. And no matter how gay San Francisco got, anywhere gay people gathered inevitably became a target.
There would be roving gangs of kids that would come in. They loved to wait till 2 o'clock in the morning, and then people would be leaving clubs and bars, and there were many assaults. We were pretty much constantly under attack.
He threw what I think was a spark plug wrench, managed to break a cheekbone.
They knocked me down and started beating me with their hands and their feet, their elbows, and said, queer faggot, we're going to beat the shit out of you, something to that effect, we're going to kill you.
In just 3 months in 1974, there were 60 documented beatings of gay people in San Francisco, largely in the Castro. Gay communities were sick of it, and they were starting to get organized. The gay liberation movement really started to accelerate a few years earlier in 1969. That June, transgender and gay people staged a multi-day uprising against police harassment at the Stonewall Bar in Greenwich Village.
They were not leaders of the gay community. They were just drag queens, street kids, bar people. Because they fought back and because other people joined them, a movement was forged.
In the 4 years after the riots, the number of gay and lesbian groups in the U.S. exploded from 50 to 800, including organizations that would become leading political forces, like Lambda Legal and the National Gay Task Force. The movement got results. In 1973, the American Psychiatric Association removed homosexuality from its list of mental disorders, and activists all over the place were fighting for new laws against discrimination.
Many homosexuals have become active in the defense of what they call gay rights.
There were gay rights victories in cities like Eugene, Oregon, St. Paul, Minnesota, and Wichita, Kansas. But at the state level, progress was a whole lot slower. In California, gay sex was still a crime because of the ban on sodomy.
In those years, thousands of gay men were arrested every year in San Francisco for consenting sexual behavior between adults.
Activists were determined to get the sodomy ban off the books. And there was a straight politician willing to fight alongside them.
My name is Willie Brown. That's actually one word. I prefer one word that way.
Willie Brown began serving in the California State Assembly in 1965, representing a slice of San Francisco.
And in that 280,000 people, I'm certain that there were a lot of gay people, but I wouldn't call it a gay district. I would call it a very enlightened district.
Willie Brown was one of the state's most prominent Black leaders, and he had a reputation as a warrior for civil rights. He also had a history, as a lawyer, of defending people charged with violating the sodomy ban.
It was just natural for me to be an advocate for equal opportunity for everybody, period.
At the urging of gay activists, he tried to pass a bill in 1969 that would legalize all sex between consenting adults. It applied to straight Californians, too, who technically could be arrested for having oral or anal sex. But everyone knew it would be a landmark victory for gay people. The media called it the Homosexual Bill of Rights. And it didn't stand a chance of getting passed.
I could not get one motion to pass my bill.
Brown's legislation was defeated 6 years in a row.
And people had all kinds of reasons why they didn't want to support my bill. But most of them had to do with the whole business of whether or not politically it was a sound decision.
Finally, in 1975, the political winds started to shift. Brown's bill passed in the state assembly, and it looked like it might have a chance in the state Senate. The Senate Majority Leader, a liberal Democrat named George Moscone, was running for mayor of San Francisco. And given the rising population of gay voters in the city, the sodomy ban repeal was a potential golden ticket for his campaign. But Moscone couldn't quite get the bill over the line. The vote was 20-20.
And we knew that if we could get a tie vote in the Senate, that person who serves as a lieutenant governor can cast the deciding vote.
The lieutenant governor, Democrat Mervyn Dimely, supported the bill, but there was a problem.
The lieutenant governor was in Colorado.
Dimely found a flight to San Francisco, but he still needed to get from there to the state capital. So at the Denver airport, he got on a public phone to try to convince the California Highway Patrol to meet him with a helicopter. Here's the late Mervyn Dimely in an oral history.
I began screaming, "I'm the Lieutenant Governor of California." And these white folks are walking by looking at me as a crazy man. Here's this black guy hollering he's Lieutenant Governor of California, and I demand that you pick me up.
Back in Sacramento, George Moscone had invoked a special rule that allowed him to literally lock the Senate doors while Dimely was en route. No one could leave, so the vote was still active. 7 hours and 1 helicopter ride later, Dimely finally arrived.
So I strode to the Senate podium and pretended I didn't know what was going on. I said, Mr. Clerk, how has the President of the Senate voted? He has not voted, sir. President votes aye.
And lo and behold, he casts the tie-breaking vote.
With the passage of Willie Brown's bill in 1975, California decriminalized sodomy. And one section of the new law focused on a specific group of people. It said that since sodomy was now legal, gay teachers like Tom Amiano could no longer lose their credentials for committing it.
We felt invigorated. We felt empowered through a group effort, the gay movement.
The new law was a lifeline for gay educators. But for social conservatives, it was an outrage. And one state legislator, a Republican from Orange County named John Briggs, wasn't going to stand for it.
The California legislature repealed homosexuality as a crime and therefore making it possible to teach in our public classrooms as open, avowed, public, and/or militant homosexual teachers.
John Briggs was in the assembly with you at the time. Do you remember him at all?
Oh, do I remember him? Of course I remember John Briggs. He constantly resorted to fictional accounts of people's lives and how they conducted themselves.
So he would insinuate that you and other supporters were gay?
Oh, yes. He did that regularly. He made a career of trying his best to defeat my efforts, and I knew he would spend the rest of his life trying.
We'll be right back.
A collision between a Chinese jet and an American spy plane.
He came and rammed into our left wing.
With relations increasingly strained, what are the chances of things spinning out of control?
The Western world was asleep.
I'm Gordon Carrera. I'll be exploring the friction in this most important of relationships and asking, has the West taken its eye off the ball?
You cannot ignore China.
From BBC Radio 4, this is Shadow War, China and the West. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
In France, in the 13th century, a teenager ascends the throne. He seems calm, collected, and as it happens, drop-dead gorgeous. But looks can be deceiving, and no one is ready for the death, destruction, and chaos that lie ahead. Step inside the reign of one of the Middle Ages' most cold-blooded rulers on This Is History Presents The Iron King, available wherever you get your podcasts.
California State Senator John Briggs had a reputation as a crank, and not a particularly exceptional one.
They labeled him part of the cuckoo caucus at times, of all the conservative guys from Orange County. He didn't like that one.
That's John Briggs' son, Ron Briggs. John died in 2020. Ron worked for his dad back in the 1970s, and he remembers his father looking for an issue that would help him stand out. He landed on one of the most divisive topics in American life, gay rights.
He probably loved the friction. He liked that kind of combat.
I entered into this fray when I disagreed violently with the right of teachers to teach publicly in California as homosexuals. I was assured, no, that would never happen, Senator, never. Well, it is happening.
In the mid-70s, John Briggs was watching gay activists notch victories all over the United States. He saw his own state legalize gay sex in 1975, the same year as Tom Amiano's victory over the San Francisco School Board. And Briggs could see a backlash beginning to form. It was starting all the way across the country with a Southern Baptist former beauty queen who sang the jingle for Florida orange juice.
Orange juice with natural vitamin C from the Florida Sunshine Tree. Visit Orangebird in the Florida Sunshine.
Anita Bryant, an entertainer and mother of four, says she wants to save her children from homosexual influences.
Someone who practices homosexuality shall not inherit the kingdom of God. God is very plain on that.
In her rise to fame, Bryant had never gotten involved in politics. But in 1977, Dade County, Florida, the home of Miami, made it illegal to discriminate against gays in employment and housing. As a Dade County resident, Bryant decided she had to do something. Within weeks of that non-discrimination ordinance getting passed, she co-founded a group to try to repeal it. It was called Save Our Children.
The Save Our Children group is appealing to parental anxieties, saying gays will flaunt their homosexuality before impressionable children.
Homosexuals cannot reproduce biologically, but they have to reproduce by recruiting our children.
In television ads, Bryant's group warned that Miami was in danger of becoming San Francisco, a hyper-sexualized gay hellscape.
It's a parade of homosexuals, men hugging other men, cavorting with little boys, wearing dresses and makeup. The same people who turned San Francisco into a hotbed of homosexuality want to do the same thing to Florida.
Gay people had made San Francisco into a haven, one of the few places in the country where they could live openly. Now, Save Our Children was distorting their joy into something sinister. And there was endless hand-wringing about gay people who held one particular job.
I'd rather burn my buildings down, and I would do so if necessary, before I ever allowed a practicing known homosexual to teach at Northwest Christian Academy.
Just this pernicious, evil slur that gay people are child molesters.
Cleve Jones again. Your
children are not safe if there's gay people around. You can't have them in the schools. You can't have them anywhere.
In just 3 weeks, Save Our Children collected over 60,000 signatures, way more than enough to get a referendum on the ballot.
I think most of us saw Anita Bryant as a fool, but recognized the danger. When you say that an entire class of people are likely to abuse your children, that kind of justifies any horrible action you might want to take against them.
Gays and lesbians across the country were horrified by what Anita Bryant had unleashed. They raised money to fight her campaign, and gay bars everywhere swapped the OJ and their screwdrivers for apple juice.
She's the one preaching hate. A song has been written to rally support against her. Hurricane Anita, the season's first bad storm.
Meanwhile, gay activists in Miami were scrambling. They'd worked hard to pass an ordinance that protected gays from discrimination. Now, they'd have to fight to keep it.
The homosexuals are also running a political-type campaign, complete with bumper stickers, bags, and buttons. But they are carefully avoiding overt signs of homosexuality because they feel it is a fight for individual liberty and not just gay rights.
In the campaign's final weeks, proponents on both sides made one last push to get out their messages, including one politician who was a long way from home.
A Californian, State Senator John Briggs, who, with his wife, arrived Sunday to help with the last-minute work.
Senator, what is it about this campaign in Dade County, Florida, that brings you from California?
Well, I believe it's the beginning of the sexual counter-revolution in this country, and I wanted to be here and be a part of it and lend an effort to make sure that it happened, that the ordinance was repealed.
On June 7th, 1977, it was time for the voters to decide.
This is a WTVJ Live Eye Special Election Report at Dade County Election Headquarters.
Tom Amiano was following the news from San Francisco.
Getting the vote results, and it really looked bad.
It was a decisive end to Dade County's homosexual controversy.
Voters in the Miami area repealed civil rights for gay people by a 2-to-1 margin.
Your stomach sank. What's wrong with the world? What's wrong with us?
Nearly half the county's registered voters had turned out on a random day in June, and they were fired up to take back the inch of progress that gays had struggled to earn. For Anita Bryant and her supporters, it was a proof of concept.
Tonight, the laws of God and the cultural values of man have been vindicated. The people of Dade County, the normal majority, have said, enough, enough, enough.
John Briggs was at Anita Bryant's victory press conference that night, celebrating alongside her. From his perspective, the Dade County vote was an extraordinary triumph, and a sign that he'd found the perfect wedge issue to boost his political career. Gay people looked like the ideal targets. Because if voters in Miami could repeal a non-discrimination law, in a liberal city with a thriving gay population, what chance did gays have in California or anywhere else?
Hey, hey, ho, ho, Christian things have
The night Anita Bryant won, spontaneous demonstrations broke out in a handful of U.S. cities, including San Francisco. A gay journalist spoke to some of the protesters there.
Why did you come here tonight?
I think we have to get off our ass and start showing strength right now because it's getting to be too late.
Were you recruited to be a faggot by your school teachers as a child?
No, it came out quite naturally.
You think that it relates to the Bay Area at all?
Yes, because they have named us Sodom and Gomorrah, and I have a feeling that they're going to try and bring it to our gates.
The day of the Dade County vote became known as Orange Tuesday, a moment gay activists would look back on as a tragedy, a turning point, and a wake-up call. In Miami, the repeal had immediate consequences. Multiple lesbians and gay men were fired from their jobs the very next day, including a secretary who'd worked for the county government for 15 years. There was also a series of assaults outside Dade County gay bars. One gay man was shot with a pellet gun, and 2 others were badly beaten. And then, just 2 weeks after Orange Tuesday, the violence came to San Francisco. We'll be back in a minute. In the days after John Briggs got back from celebrating Anita Bryant's victory in Florida, he proposed a resolution in the California Senate. It was a commendation for Bryant, praising what he called her courageous stand to protect American children from exposure to blatant homosexuality. The resolution died in committee. That same week, Robert Hillsborough, a 33-year-old gardener who worked for the city of San Francisco, went out dancing with his boyfriend. They ended up at a gay bar called Oil Can Harry's, a disco with parquet floors and floor-to-ceiling mirrors. As the night wound down, they stopped at a hamburger place on their way home. And in the parking lot, they got taunted by 4 young men who clocked them as gay. When the couple drove away, the 4 men followed and attacked them outside their apartment building in the Mission District. Robert Hillsborough's boyfriend managed to get away, but Robert couldn't escape. Witnesses watched him get stabbed over and over again in the middle of the street while his attacker yelled a homophobic slur. Robert died of his wounds that night. The next day, his friends posted signs in the Castro to warn the gay community.
And it said, "Our friend Robert Hillsborough was killed last night by young thugs screaming, 'Fag, fag.'"
That's Gwen Craig. She saw one of those signs in a drugstore window when she was walking in the Castro with a friend.
It went on to give a few gruesome details. We said, this is terrible.
Gwen and her friend wanted to learn more about how a gay man was murdered so close to where they lived, in the heart of gay San Francisco.
We went to the newspaper stand nearby and we took out the newspaper. Finally, we found something on page 42. Young man stabbed in the Mission District, and, there was nothing about what had been said by the perpetrators or anything. We said, this is wrong. They're not telling the story. They're not telling the full implications of this.
Gwen was certain that the story of Robert Hillsborough's murder didn't begin the night he was killed.
What happened was Anita Bryant. What happened was Dade County, Florida.
She wasn't the only one who felt that way. Robert Hillsborough's mother and brother both said that Anita Bryant's anti-gay crusade helped create the climate for his killing. And in the days after Robert's death, a rumor spread that the connection to Bryant was even more explicit.
Witnesses have told police that the accused murderers in stabbing Hillsborough more than 15 times said, "Here's one for Anita."
Gwen was 26, and she hadn't planned on becoming an activist when she moved to San Francisco 2 years earlier. She just wanted to get away from the long Chicago winters and soak in the lesbian social scene. But Anita Bryant's campaign had left her shaken.
People who, like me, who had never felt, we're here to be a political movement, were saying, yeah, it's time for me to be engaged.
Gwen joined an activist group that popped up in the wake of the Dade County vote. She even agreed to be the media coordinator, although she barely knew what that meant. Now, appalled by the coverage of Robert Hillsborough's murder, she borrowed her neighbor's electric typewriter and banged out a press release.
We blame the Anita Bryants of the world because their campaigns are stirring up, this kind of hatred. And we drove around to the radio stations and the TV stations and the newspaper offices and we handed out our little press release. And we kind of go, oh, okay, thank you.
Gwen didn't think anything would come of it. But it felt good to do something in response to such a heinous crime.
went home and went to bed, and I got a call first thing, I think around 5:30 in the morning the next morning. And it was a radio guy saying, "Hi, this is so-and-so from radio, blah, 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 blah. I'm live on the air in about 5 minutes, and I've got your press release here. And I think, if you could read it live on the air, that would really work best for us. So do you have a copy right there?" From that moment forward, for the rest of the day, I got no break.
With Gwen's first ever press release, Robert Hillsborough's murder got the coverage it deserved.
And it became the story of the week. It moved from being page 42 to page 1.
A few days later, on June 26th, San Francisco's gay community held a parade. It had been scheduled as part of the annual commemorations of the Stonewall riots, what would later be called Pride. But in 1977, after the loss in Miami and the murder of Robert Hillsborough, everything felt more political and more charged.
We are all here today for what was in the past a day of gaiety and great joy, and a statement of pride. The mood these days is different. The parade has become a march.
All over the country, the rage over Dade County brought gay Americans into the streets. In Kansas City, dozens of people came together in the first public display of the local gay community. In New York, tens of thousands paraded through the streets. And then there was San Francisco's Gay Freedom Day, at the time, the largest gay demonstration in history, with an estimated 200,000 people.
It's a new militancy in the gay movement, and it's here today.
No more Dade County for us, honey. No more.
This is, a sign of gay power. What we can do if we all get together. But we so rarely do this. We got to do it more often.
One contingent in San Francisco carried a bunch of giant portraits on sticks. It was a lineup of murderous despots: Adolf Hitler, Joseph Stalin, Idi Amin, and then, with her coiffed hair and megawatt smile, Anita Bryant.
I was aroused by the disgusting campaign that this woman in Florida conducted. Then, of course, as so many San Franciscans were, I was very appalled by the murder of the young man. That's why I came.
Robert Hillsborough didn't live to see this demonstration of gay power. He didn't live to see flags in San Francisco lowered to half-staff in his honor. And he didn't live to see how his own community remembered him at Gay Freedom Day.
On the steps of City Hall, I will never forget it. I used to always cry when I told this story. There were flowers that people had brought for Robert Hillsborough.
Flowers were placed on the steps of City Hall in honor of a gay city gardener brutally stabbed to death by teenagers earlier in the week.
I just looked at that and thought, page 42. And, now people know who he is. And they know why he died. And they know that we got to do something to stop this. Because we have our enemies, and they are not going to stop, obviously. They're just getting started.
Gwen was right. Around the time that she was memorializing Robert Hillsborough, John Briggs was promoting a bill in the state Senate, a proposal to ban gay people from working in California public schools. That first effort didn't end up going anywhere. It turned out Briggs had missed a legislative deadline. But there was another route he could take, one that would get him and his idea even more attention. He could bring the plan directly to the people of California and let them vote on whether gay people belonged in schools.
As I put this initiative in, I felt I had one incumbent duty upon myself as one man, just one man, to bring it to the attention of the California voters, to allow them to vote on it.
The proposal would become known as the Briggs Initiative. It isolated and amplified the most incendiary talking point from Anita Bryant's Miami campaign, the idea that gay people, and gay teachers specifically, were dangerous child molesters. And it wouldn't just threaten the livelihoods of thousands of gay educators. It would be a trial balloon, testing the public appetite for purging gay people from entire segments of society. Cleve Jones.
We were afraid of prison. We were afraid of massive levels of violence. And then what if this spreads to other industries? What if they decide we can't work in hospitals? It would give license and fuel to everybody that opposed us. So the stakes were very, very high, and we didn't think we had a chance.
Coming up this season on Slow Burn.
We've got to fight back. We can't let this happen in California.
If we lose here, it'll be 50 years before we ever get back up again.
I was like, I've never run a campaign before.
I'm told that lesbians can't raise money. And she said, watch me, bitch.
You know, the door opens and there's this incredible man. I mean, Ronald Reagan was the real deal.
My name is Harvey Milk, and I'm here to recruit you.
This was, tens of thousands of pissed off gay guys and lesbians roaring down Market Street.
One thing's for sure, the size of this crowd underlines the fact that the hottest issue in next November's elections will be the Briggs Initiative.
And in our next episode, the campaign to ban gay teachers gets off to an explosive start.
Did it make your dad feel more important that somebody wanted to assassinate him?
Oh, I think he loved it.
Can't wait for next week's episode? Listen to it now. Immediately unlock the first 5 episodes of Slow Burn Gays Against Briggs by subscribing to Slate Plus. Your subscription also gets you ad-free listening across all your favorite Slate podcasts, plus other member-exclusive content. Join now by clicking subscribe at the top of the Slow Burn show page on Apple Podcasts, or visit slate.com/slowburnplus to get access wherever you listen. Thanks. This season of Slow Burn was written and produced by me, Christina Cauterucci. If you or anyone you know are in crisis, you can contact the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline anytime. Just dial 988 or visit 988lifeline.org. Slow Burn is produced by Sophie Summergrad, Kelly Jones, and Joel Meyer. Josh Levin is the editorial director of Slow Burn. Derek John is our executive producer. Susan Matthews is Slate's executive editor. Merritt Jacob is our senior technical director. We had engineering help from Patrick Fort and Madeline Ducharme. Our theme music was composed by Alexis Cuadrado. Ivy Lee Simones did the cover art, which features an image of Silvana Nova from a poster designed by Larry Hermson and the Too Much Graphics Collective. We had production help from Emily Gaddick, Jude Jaffe-Block, Dave Clark McCoy at Studio Pods Media, and Women's Audio Mission in San Francisco. Some of the audio you heard in our show comes courtesy of the Gay, Lesbian, Bisexual, Transgender Historical Society. Special thanks to Isaac Fellman at the GLBT Historical Society, Lillian Faderman, Rami Khalil, Fred Fegis, Rachel Strom, and Deb Greenspan. And to Slate's Evan Chung, Madeline Ducharme, June Thomas, Brian Lauder, Katie Shepard, Seth Brown, Katie Rayford, Caitlin Schneider, Alexandra Cole, Joshua Metcalf, Heidi Strom-Moon, Hillary Fry, and Alicia Montgomery, Slate's VP of Audio. Thanks for listening.